All right, we're going to get started in a couple minutes. I'm just going to let it stay here because I'm afraid that if I don't, it's not going to work. Computers are so finicky sometimes. Such silliness. Okay. So everyone who's joining us on Facebook, we're going to get started in a few minutes. Hi, Fred and Sari. Hi, Ray. Hi, Larry.
Hi, everyone.
Good to be here with you. I anticipated streaming to not work as smoothly as I would like, and it decided to play a trick on me and to work, even though it hasn't been. So we're streaming a little earlier than I otherwise would have wanted, but all is well. We're going to start in a minute anyway. Perfect. Everyone have a good New Year's?
I worked
Quiet.
Yeah, we had a nice time at home.
Quiet.
So wide array. Steve, I imagine things are pretty busy for you these days.
every day. The only reason I could come is I had a 4-hour infusion I was supposed to do this afternoon that she canceled on me.
Well, I'm glad you can be here.
Me too.
What kind of infusion, Steve?
IVIG.
Oh.
Gamma globulin.
Hi, Misty. So nice to have you back. Oh, you're muted, though. We can't hear you yet.
Yes, I said hi. Happy New Year. Glad to be back.
Happy New Year. All right. It's 1 o'clock, and I think some more of our friends will be joining us as we go. But why don't we get started with the blessing so that we can kind of dive into everything before us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah Hafoch ba, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Yedadai, dai, 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 dai. Yedadai, dai, 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 dai. Yedadai, dai, 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 dai. Yedadai, dai, dai, dai. Hold on just 1 second, sorry. Hi, I'm so sorry. That was a pastoral call about someone at the end of their life, and I didn't want to miss it, so I apologize. Okay, So let's dive into this week's Torah portion. There is so much going on in all of these different Torah portions because we're in the middle of the Exodus story. And of course, that will come to a big, big conclusion next week in our very exciting portion of Bishalach. But right now, we are in the midst of all of the plagues. And of course, if you had a chance to peek at the Musar Torah commentary that we have, it talks all about the midah, or the soul trait of kavod, which means honor or respect. So let me share my screen right now so that we can dive into that. Okay, it should be working. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. So there's a lot in these texts. Is this big enough? Can people see this? I can make it a little bigger if that helps. Does that work? Thumbs up? Yes? Awesome. Okay. So we are looking right now at this idea of kavod, of honor or respect. And it comes up, this word comes up in a lot of different places within Jewish texts. These are just a few of them. It is not a conclusive list by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just to kind of give us a feel of what kavod really is all about. So one of the places that it shows up is with regard to Shabbat, this honoring of Shabbat. And I wonder, like, what do you think that means to give Shabbat honor? Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Well, I think it means to respect the laws of Shabbat, to make Shabbat in your home and in your heart as much as one can today. That's what I think.
So really, yeah, like taking the time to really be able to observe it.
Yes, observe. That's the word I was looking for. Yes, thank you. That's it.
Anyone else have anything to add to Jessica's wonderful answer?
That's what I was going to say, basically.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is like the rabbis tell a story, which I imagine many of us here have probably heard before, that one way in which we honor Shabbat is actually by putting a cover over the challah. You heard this, right? So when we have the challah on the table, we don't just leave it out. We specifically put a cover over it. And the idea behind it, some of it might sound a little bit silly, of when we're saying the blessings over the candles and when we're saying the blessings over the grape juice, we don't want the challah to get jealous. That has to wait a while, right? But there actually is this idea of honoring Shabbat that's integral in this kind of custom, which is when we take this kind of veil over the challah and we're marking this special meal by doing that, by thinking about the feelings even of inanimate objects. What we're doing is we're adding this personalization and this empathy and this respect for the traditions that really can make us attuned to the importance of the holiday. And so it's kind of all factored in there. Yeah, Jessica.
Yeah, so one more thing I thought of was about honoring was in the manner we honor a person, we separate that person from all the other people in a certain way. And so with Shabbat, we separate Shabbat from the other days of the week through our actions and through our intentions. That's it.
Yeah. And
Well,
if we do
the-
that with the day of the week, sorry, Steve.
Well, we say the Havdalah blessing. That's part of the blessing. We separate the holy from the secular, ordinary.
Right. Or the holy from the not yet holy, right?
Yeah, better phrase.
Yeah. I mean, and if we feel that way and we're being so protective over our days, if we're being so protective over our challah, then how much more protective should we be and how much more respect and honor should we give to human beings, living people before us who come into our lives, right? That's part of the piece there too. When we look at this idea next of lichvod hakodesh, of honoring God, what does it mean to honor God? And that's a bigger question. It might be even harder to answer. There's no wrong answers, though. Anyone have any ideas? Steve, you look like you're mulling something.
Well, yeah, I take a moment to think, to put my thoughts together, especially at my
Fair
age.
enough.
You honor God by leading a good life,
Mm,
by leading, meaning good, doing good, being a good person.
that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, Misty.
You know, the first term that came to my mind is to show fear and awe. Just because he's fearsome, awesome, overwhelming. And so we bow down and prostrate ourselves before him humbly, is my first reaction to that.
Yeah, so you're connecting the soul trait of yirah, which is fear and awe that we've been talking about, right?
Yeah,
To
right.
this one of respect. And that's a really interesting kind of coming together. Beautiful.
I always feel honoring God is listening to God.
So what does that mean to listen to God? Because most of us don't have God's voice in our ears, right?
Yes, that's why it's hard to do, but it really is. And you can hear the words when you read the daily Torah readings. You can hear the words when you get up in the morning and your heart is full of gratitude. I think God is saying that to you. God is talking to you through the sunrise and talking to you by everything around you in the creation.
And then a little bigger piece of the fruit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it reminds me when I was in seminary, I was asked to define the word prayer in one word. And the word that came to mind was attunement, right? This attunement to something that is bigger. And it seems like that's around what you're talking about.
Yes, yes.
Beautiful. So great ideas. And they're different, aren't they? The way that we show honor in those two cases.
It's also that we're taught 6 days so you're working, on the 7th you should rest, and to prepare to have that rest. I mean, it's not just on the day as the preparation and say, do I really need to go to the grocery store today? Or would I like to call someone who's really dear to me? Would I like to read something over? Would I like to sit in the sun and hope that it's sunny now here? And, you know, it's what does it mean for us to rest?
So it's like this pre-thought, like we can't just honor and respect just by being there. It actually takes some thought or preparation beforehand to get there.
Well, if you think of all the preparation that I understand, particularly in the Orthodox community, if you've pre-prepared all your meals, it's a tremendous amount of preparation. You know, and to make the decision yourself. If I remember when I was a student, you know, I really had to teach myself to say, Saturday is not a day of writing, writing papers. Saturday is a day of not writing papers or not working or not, you know, unless gardening is your way of resting, and it is one of mine. You know, it's like, what does rest mean? Rest means to open yourself, particularly in the time of COVID, it is a time to rebalance yourself. You know, to do the things that make you calmer, to do the things that make you able to get up the next day and do things that are not as easy.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I think, Rabbi Cassi, I think that this is different now, my thought here. It popped into my head, that by honoring God and honoring Shabbat, you're really taking time to honor yourself, because you're giving yourself the time by practicing Shabbat. You're giving your present, you are reflecting, you are, resting. And so it's really giving you something in return. So it's in a sense honoring yourself.
Beautiful.
Well.
Yeah, and I didn't include the term here for like self-respect and self-honor. But what's really interesting that's coming out here is when there is honor and respect going to God, going to Shabbat, going to other people, or going to ourselves, like they all kind of work in tandem with one another. Respect and honor leads to respect and honor.
Mm-hmm.
It's also if we're taught that there's a piece of God in all of us. And so it really feeds into what was just said, is that when we honor ourselves, we are honoring God and however we understand God or our relationship with God.
Beautiful.
I like to think of the concept of the attitude of gratitude. Always remembering that you didn't do this yourself, that there's always something in the background, which I would prefer to believe is God. First thing you say when you get up in the morning is Modeh ani lefonecha. And I didn't understand that until relatively later in my life, how important that little short 2 sentences, or 1 sentence, 2 lines was.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know what Steve just said, Modeh ani lefonecha is about giving thanks to God. That's what it is. I give thanks to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That absolutely all of this kind of folds in on itself and is so important. And I think it's really crucial as we go into this portion and as we're talking about kavod, that we remember all of these different ways in which kavod plays in, right? We truthfully could spend the entire hour just talking about all these different forms of kavod. The kavod of our parents, the kavod of Torah, the kavod harav, of a rabbi, a teacher of any kind, really, kavod hamet, the ways in which we honor the dead. Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a quick question. I was trying to think, in the Torah, God talks about honoring Shabbat, honoring father and mother, but does God ever talk about honoring God's self? Does God say this is what you have to do to honor me? I can't think of if there is such a
Not
place.
directly, but
Yeah, in the
indirectly.
Torah itself, it doesn't say it that directly. There definitely are times where God gets frustrated because there isn't enough kavod hakodesh going on, but it's not quite as direct. This term of likvod hakodesh doesn't come from the Torah directly. It comes from rabbinic texts and other texts post-Torah.
Well, that makes, sorry, I just a quick finish. That makes me think that God doesn't want us so much to honor God, but to honor ourselves and to honor life and to honor Torah. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to what Sari said a minute ago, right? That by honoring all those things, perhaps that is how we honor God.
I was just going to say that, and I came in a little later, excuse me, that often in the text that we read and so on, God reminds us, like, don't forget, I'm the one that took you out of slavery in Egypt. He says it quite often, like, hey, wait a minute, you're forgetting. It was me who did it.
Yeah, so maybe that is a way of saying, hello, I'm here, give me a little respect, people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Just seeing honoring father and mother, which is one of the commandments. And as an anecdote that someone pointed out to me, that is the only commandment that offers a reward.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to like it. Doesn't mean you have to have Shabbat dinner every week, but you still honor them. And we had that discussion in our family a lot. But anyway, so.
Yeah, it's such an important value for sure. Thank you. And it's a complicated one. There's so much to talk about there because, of course, people have different relationships. And sometimes when there's abuse that factors in, there's different ways in which that shows itself. But it is really an important topic in its own right. I want us to move us forward a little bit. So within the text for today, it's Rabbi Nancy Weschler who wrote this really beautiful, beautiful short piece, but a thoughtful piece on kavod and Parashat Bo. And she writes, kavod is usually translated honor or dignity. Kol hakavod, which is something that we sometimes say, right, when someone does something well, is enthusiastically exclaimed when someone has done something of worth. The root of kavod carries other meanings as well, like sweeping, as in sweeping the floors to treat a place honorably. Liver, the organ credited to purifying the body's blood, and heavy. This single root contains nuances of purification, cleaning up, heavy lifting, and as a result of the effort, honor. Kavod does not come by osmosis. It takes muscle. Kavod demands that we muster our energy, clear away the clutter, and like a weightlifter, breathe into raising the weighted barbell high above our heads. And I think that a lot of what was said already about kavod, really, we can find this resonance within our comments. So I'm going to take us to the very beginning of our Torah portion for today, just the first few verses here. And does anyone want to read these? Any takers?
I can read.
Go ahead, sorry, you can do it.
Oh, okay. Then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and hearts of his courtiers, in order that I may display these my signs among them, and that you may recount in the hearing of your child and of your child's child how made a mockery of the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs among them, in order that you may know that I am the Lord. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go that they may worship me.
Okay, so there's a few things that are going on just within these 3 verses, right? This idea, and this goes back to the very first word, or it's not the first word in the Torah portion, but it's the word that the Torah portion is named after, bo, which means to come, right? So God is saying, go, come to the Pharaoh, essentially. And what happens? They do. They went to the Pharaoh to be in front of him. And in the commentary, for anyone who read it, you might remember her conversation about this, that despite everything that's going on, despite how the Jews have been treated within Egypt for all this time, despite all the hardship that took place when he had left Egypt long before, all of the different things that are on their minds, despite all of that, God calls Moses and Aaron to approach Pharaoh with respect and honor, and they do. She writes, why is Pharaoh worthy of being honored? The answer, I believe, can be found in Moses' childhood. Pharaoh's daughter found baby Moses in the basket floating down the Nile. She rescued him to avoid the Pharaoh, I can't even read that word at the moment. Thank you, Steve. Sorry. Ruling of killing every male Jewish child. Pharaoh could have kept his ruling in place and decreed Moses' death. Yet Moses lived and was raised with riches in the palace, guided through life by none other than Pharaoh's daughter. Apparently, Pharaoh had decided to spare that one little boy and let him live. That single decision made Moses' life and all of his deeds possible. It was ultimately Pharaoh, not his daughter, who saved the life of Moses. To give honor to Pharaoh, to come to him requires sweeping away of everything but that one fact. And I don't know about you, but this really struck me, right? Because we live in a world that is so often black and white, right? Someone is either absolutely awful or absolutely wonderful, and it's hard finding the gray area in between. Pharaoh created such hardship for the Jewish people. And yet what this text does is it seeks to find the things that Pharaoh has done that make him worthy of being honored anyway, and sweeping away everything else. So I wonder if you have reflections or thoughts on this.
But how do we know for sure that Pharaoh knew that Moses was, Hebrew? I mean, does it say that Pharaoh learned this? I mean, we know the daughter, she didn't even know, I don't think. I mean, just a baby. So I know the storyteller, and of course the movie made everything a little sugar, but you think Pharaoh knew that Moses was who he was?
A lot of texts, I mean, it's a great question, and maybe it's not accurate. There's a lot of midrashim that say that, yeah, they probably did know, because this is a time where so many children are being killed. And to have a baby who was put in the water and taken out, you don't know who the parent is, right? It seems, based on the time period, based on what was going on, based on the fact that they didn't know who the parent was, this likely was a Hebrew. It was a very, it made sense for that to be the case.
Right.
And he was uncircumcised. I mean, he was circumcised, rather. So that also would make a difference.
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
Also that, his heart, in some of the bad acts, his heart was hardened. Right? It was almost like, it wasn't his original will.
Yeah, we're going to get back to the hardened heart. So it's a really important thing to bring in here. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Jessica.
Also, didn't his mother step forward to wet nurse him? And would she have done that for an Egyptian baby at that time? I don't think so. After, losing her own.
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? It's possible that she would, because then she'd be in a position of a little bit more respect and privilege than she otherwise might have been. But Miriam's the one who said, hey, I know someone who could be the wet nurse. And lo and behold, it was Moses's mom, right?
Going back to what we read previously, not this paragraph, but the other one, and the question whether God has ever asked for honor, to be honored in the Torah. Well, it really is saying, since God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and I know we'll get to that more, but just the idea that God wanted to be honored to show that God is one to all. So that is the way of really answering that, yes, it's definitely in the Torah.
Beautiful. It's a lovely insight. There's lots of ways in which to show that kavod, certainly. Looking at this text here, I wonder how you feel about giving kavod to someone who is acting in a way that is not necessarily so respectable.
Well, I think for one thing, perhaps God wanted Moses to be humble, humble himself, and, and the lesson of forgiveness. And so there's a lot going on here, so I think, often when you show kindness to someone who is not very nice, you don't, mimic the behavior, that they present. Anyhow, I think that you can go a lot further. And so there's, so there are all these, subtle issues there as well.
Yeah, what you said, sorry, also reminds me of something that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said about relationships with her husband, right? And how she needed that sometimes being forgetful was really important. That the being able to forget the things that weren't so good sometimes in order to be able to move forward and to forgive, that's actually a really important skill to have. She said it in a far more elegant way than I'm saying it right now, but the message is the same.
Right. I read the book. Yeah, I read several books on her.
Any other thoughts on that?
this reminds me, sometimes you meet people and it's like to love your parents and it's almost impossible for that person because of whatever has happened in their life and in their home. And the only thing that I've ever heard that really made sense to me, it didn't like ring a bell. And so I'd say, I'd love to do this or suggest to someone that I do this for this way, is they created you. If it wasn't for that combination for whatever amount of time, that is the person, that is why you are standing here on this earth today. And you may hate everything else about them, they still created you. It's really
We're not obligated to love our parents. We're only obligated to honor them.
correct.
But that means if personalizing that, you really have a situation where you don't feel you owe them anything. Yet when they're in trouble, they need support. You have to be the first person to do it. And even if you don't, they don't command your respect or you're a lousy parent, whatever. You still have to make sure that they're safe, clothed, fed, cared for.
That can be very, very hard in some situations, right?
Oh yeah.
Very challenging.
Yes.
Well, if as they mentioned in the reading, if you feel that every person has a spark of that divine light, that means something, and you should, B'Tselem Elohim, you have to respect that, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's such an easy thing to say, right? It's so beautiful. It's a wonderful way to live our lives. It is such a hard thing to act on sometimes, right? And even here, like we talk about Pharaoh and being able to give him the honor and respect despite everything that he's done, to be able to find his merits. Also, we see later on that the Talmud teaches that even when the Egyptians were waging war with the Israelites, they too were worthy of honor and respect. And we all know this perhaps from the Passover Seder, right? This whole dialogue that takes place between the angels and God, that right after the people are able to go on the shores of the sea and they're finally free and they're singing and dancing, the ministering angels wanted to sing their song as well, right? That's what the Talmud says. For the angels would sing songs to each other, as it states, and they called out to each other and said, and all of these beautiful kind of words extolling God for the fact that the Jewish people were saved and that the Egyptian people had been swallowed by the sea. And then God calls out and says, but they are the work of my hands. They're drowning at the sea and you wish to say songs, right? God is saying the Jewish people, they're celebrating because they're free. You are celebrating because the Egyptians are being killed. Even here, even while this is going on, we do not celebrate because of the downfall of even the wicked. They are deserving too of honor and respect. They are my handiwork.
Don't we do that at the Seder?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's I think that's the whole lesson here. We may be at war with another, soldiers from one side and soldiers on the other. They're fighting the war because the government's declared the war. You can't. Maybe you have to learn how to hate them to kill them, but you can't take their humanity away from them, because that's what the whole basis of bigotry and what's the word? The racism and you mean and put people beneath you, whether it's class or skin color. You can't do that. You have to be on an even keel.
Right, exactly. That I don't remember who I heard this from originally, but whenever you're pointing a finger at someone, right? You're pointing 4 back at yourself, or at least 3, depending on how your hands work. I guess it's more 3 than 4, but you're pointing back at yourself more, right? Like when we are diminishing someone else, it's not even just that we're showing them a lack of honor and respect. We're showing ourselves a lack of honor and respect. We're showing God a lack of honor and respect. They're all linked because of exactly what Tom said.
But I have a problem with some of this. Maybe I'm not understanding it. How about the Holocaust and the wanton killing and enslavement of our people? And how for the Nazis, they chose to follow orders and to give orders and to kill us. So I can't, the only people who can forgive are the dead ones, because they are the ones that, or the ones who were tortured. I'm sorry, I just have a problem with finding the goodness in people who would choose to kill others for no reason.
Yeah, there's no goodness in the action, right? And this, by the way, this is not saying this, there's nothing in here about forgiveness.
Okay.
There's nothing in here about anything other than kavod, other than respect. And so what this is asking us to do is, when we use the term the Nazis, right? That's taking the humanity out of that. People who were Nazis were individual human beings. The action of killing people, the action of being a part of that, there is nothing redeeming in that whatsoever. We all feel that. We all know that, right? But within each individual, I imagine there were redeeming things within their character. And that's what this is talking about. This is talking about seeing the humanity in each person.
There used to be a song, you have to be carefully taught, that you have to be carefully taught to hate, to denigrate, we're seeing that this is, white, black and white relationships here is when you come into the world as a baby, you're innocent. But then you're around people who have certain values or not values, every people have different values, but when you were born, you didn't have that. You didn't have that. It's what's happened in your life, and particularly when I think of the Nazis, you think of how that was beat in, and how that was made to happen, and things like that's the way you raise people and how you develop what you believe, what you don't believe, what's good, what's bad. Is taught.
It's from South Pacific, and you have to be taught to hate when you're 6 or 7 or 8.
Right.
That was such a wonderful show to take on that whole concept, between white and the locals. And I've used that often in speeches. The Nazis had this youth corps. They started with the kids. They dressed them up in uniforms and started changing their minds, or whatever the mind control term is, indoctrination, when they were very young. So, you blame them for that. But I agree with what the rabbi said, which is really clarifying that it's the actions they take. You can't, but can't really condemn them until there's actions.
Yeah, Jessica, go ahead. Thank you so much, Irv.
Well, just to address what Michael was talking about, a lot of, if not most of the killing of the Jews was done in the East, in the land in Poland and the Ukraine and Lithuania, in the Pale of Settlement. And the Nazis rolled in with shooting squads, the Einsatzgruppen. They couldn't have done that without the help of the local people. And in many villages in these lands, the Jews found their neighbors, their Christian neighbors who had been their friends, were standing above a pit shooting at them the next day. And I don't know if those people were taught to hate, but an opportunity showed itself. And many of them took that opportunity. And the opportunity was to possess what the Jews had, which was in many cases better than what they had. oh, I could go on, and I've been reading Timothy Snyder.
Yeah,
History of the Holocaust. I highly recommend it.
right. And none of this is excuses for bad actions, right? It's just that this is pushing us, and this is so incredibly hard. It's pushing us to find that which is good, even in the people who do the most evil. And that's not an easy thing to do, but I so wish that Frank was here right now, because I think he would have so much of value to add to this conversation. He was just recently on a podcast, and I'm not going to talk too much for him, but he shared this with me yesterday, and I was watching it because he was a neo-Nazi as a child. And he on this podcast talks about what happened that brought him into the neo-Nazi movement, and then what acts of kindness made him really think deeply about the beliefs that he had been kind of brainwashed into believing, so that he would question that and change his life entirely in a different direction and actually convert to Judaism, right? He has such a powerful story, and I'll have him speak at the temple at some point, but it goes to that, right? Because if we find those redeeming pieces in people and we nurture those, then perhaps that gives people the ability to make better choices.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want us to sit with that for a little while. Yeah, please.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I heard Elie Wiesel say, when he was alive, of course, that when they were forced out to watch this parade of military people and the Germans and all the local people raised their hands to salute, and that straight out arm salute. He said one of the inmates from the camp was taken by the emotion and was doing the same thing. I mean, here it's just a human reaction. So we're all subject to those even terrible things. So anyway, that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Irv.
Rabbi Cassi, yes, I have a little hard time, and I'm maybe I need you to repeat what you just said, but you say, I understand, and I talked about, finding, also forgiveness and all of that. But what Michael said really, resonates with me as well. And, but you said finding in this Nazi soldier, finding what is good, finding the humanity in each person, even if they did evil. That's very hard. When it comes to the Nazis and Holocaust, I just have a hard time thinking in that respect.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand. And for people who were in Auschwitz, for people who were in the camps, that was an impossibility, right? Like, you weren't in a position where you could do anything. You were being treated, like all the people who were there were being treated as if they weren't human. They didn't have the ability to do what I'm saying because they had no power, no way to do any of that. My comments were more towards like Frank's story and how acts of kindness in his life pushed him to actually change it. And now he spends his life fighting neo-Nazis and fighting white supremacy. And that's more what I meant. Nazis, all of that is such an extreme case.
Right.
And like, I wasn't alive when that was going on. I can't propose to understand what people were going through. I don't mean to minimize that in any way.
No, you clarified and yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to skip these two pieces from Proverbs, as important as they are, to get to this other piece that Tom raised a little while ago, this idea of hardening the heart. So when we look at this verse, and this right here at the beginning of verse 10 as well, it says, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart." Now the word for kavod, or the word for honor is kavod, right? But if we notice here, the exact same root is also the word for heaviness, which is translated as hardened. So hardening a heart is connected. It has the same shoresh, the same Hebrew root as the word kavod, respect. And we see that again in Exodus 7:14. I guess this isn't again. This is the first time in last week's Torah portion, where it says that Moses, or that Pharaoh has a hardened heart, kaved lev, right? And so what is this connection between Pharaoh's hardened heart and this idea of kavod?
Please explain.
So I want us to kind of wrestle with this because I think it's there for a reason. It's pushing us. It's showing us two sides of the same coin. It's really challenging us quite a bit. Yeah, sorry. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no.
Sorry. I thought you just unmuted yourself.
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, in Musar, all of the midot have two sides, right? So there's an extreme on both sides. So I thinking it's relating to that, kind of accept the other side of the coin.
Yeah. So, let's dive into that. Let's talk about it. And in Shemot Rabbah, I think they give us a little bit of a clue. This is basically a commentary on the book of Exodus. That's what Shemot Rabbah is. It's a midrash. When the Holy One, blessed be he, just a name for God, warns a man once, twice, thrice, and he doesn't repent, and God will close his heart. What does I have hardened imply? That God made his heart like a liver, into which even if boiled a second time, no juice enters. So also was the heart of Pharaoh made like a liver, and he did not receive the words of God. Hence, for I have hardened his heart. Okay, so let's talk about this. You might have more questions after reading that than you do clarity and answers. When we look at this, right, what is it saying? Well, kavod, honor and respect, as we talked about at the very beginning of this hour, right, is about intentionality. It's about opening ourselves up to something that is sacred. It's about taking the time to really think through and give respect to ourselves, to God, to Torah, to Shabbat, to others. And here we have the exact opposite. Here we have a human being imploring Pharaoh to do the right thing and him saying no consistently. Here we have God trying to give him wisdom and him saying no consistently. He is given kavod, and instead he turns that kavod, honor and respect, into being totally closed off, not allowing any of that in. We're going to talk in just a second. I'll skip ahead slightly in saying this, but that's okay. That this idea of kavod, it's connected with this idea of heaviness, right? And so the question is, in our lives, where do we place weight? Where do we place importance? Do we place it when we look at another person and we give them kavod? What we're doing is we're saying, you have weight, you matter. I'm going to pay attention to you because you have a substance as a human being that is deserving of my attention and my thoughtfulness. And here, Pharaoh is saying, no one has weight, not God, not human beings, nothing. The only thing that has weight is me. I'm the only thing that matters. Yeah, Shelley, are you saying something?
Yeah, I was wondering, the thing that confuses me is that God hardened his heart. Now, why would God harden his heart? So God is saying, I have control. It's not like Pharaoh's got even free will here. His heart is hardened. He can't do anything other than what he's doing and saying no. So I'm very confused by this. I've been looking and trying to figure it out, and I'm confused. Yeah.
Right. I think that part of that confusion might come from the difference between reading the text in Hebrew versus in English, right? Because it's translated as a hardened heart all throughout, but the Hebrew words that are used are actually a little bit different. So at first it says chazak lev, which means a strengthening of the heart. And at first it also says that Pharaoh is strengthening his own heart. Once it gets to a certain point, God says, I will harden his heart. And the word that's used is kabed. So there is kind of a slow process, which I think is why Shemot Rabbah is saying, when God warns him once, twice, thrice, and he still isn't listening, this is what happens.
Okay.
Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
Well, I wonder if God didn't have a sort of a big picture about what had to happen between when Moses and Aaron first showed up to ask Pharaoh to let the people go, and ultimately there was death of the firstborn, and then we were allowed to leave, and then we were yet pursued. So there's this whole arc. Besides from making the Seder a lot shorter, if Pharaoh had acquiesced after like the first or second plague, things might have been very different. I can't right now think about how, but maybe this is part of God's big picture. Unpleasant as it is, it might have had a better turnout for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
I have always thought that the reason I felt rather obvious that God needed to play a theater situation here and use the 10 plagues, not only to show the Egyptians his power, but the Israelites too. They had little knowledge of him at this point. So he needed to show to them, look what I can do. And as a warning, if nothing else, to the Israelites, and a demonstration to both them and the Egyptians.
Yeah, absolutely. All of this has a place within the story for sure. Yeah, Misty.
So following the theme of what Steve just said, you know, the ability to know God is a gift that God gives us, right? He opens our eyes, our heart, our minds to his presence, right? And he's given that gift to Pharaoh, to all mankind, and yet Pharaoh has turned it down repeatedly, at which point the hardening of the heart is, and I'm taking that gift away from you, and you're going to reap that punishment. This is it. So, you know, when you think about that in today's world, you know, you see so many what seem to be hardened hearts, right? I mean, it's like we're all given this incredible gift because somewhere along in today's discussion, we talked about how there's a bit of God in each one of us, you know, in his image. And if you shut that off, then he would take it away and you'll reap that eternal punishment of not knowing him, of not having him. So it's a good lesson. It's a warning for everyone, for the Israelites, for all of us.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful metaphor. I mean, not wonderful metaphor. It's really a hard one, but I think it's a really helpful one. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I relate to my childhood and, you know, and then my early adulthood when Catherine and I were married and she was in the South and we went home and there was all this looking down at and of course it's the year of the 60s, you know, it's a lot of racial tension and but there were a lot of criticism aimed at, you know, how, and we had to listen to how poorly we treated, I include myself because I was living in the South, poorly we treated blacks in the South. But I can't tell you how many times I heard growing up the word schwarze in the negative way, and the word goyish cup, and you know, and we got to start with ourselves first. Is the point I'm making. We have to start with ourselves and look at our behavior. Stop thinking we're at some class above somebody else, or we're somehow superior because we may have a little more education, or we may have a little more wealth, or whatever it is that we structure our classes. But it has to go. I think if you this whole thing is pushing me toward that kind of thinking.
Yeah, thank you so much, Herb. And actually, it's a really wonderful segue into what Rabbi Nachman of Breslov teaches here, right? That each person is required to minimize his own kavod, honor, and to maximize the honor of the omnipresent one, the honor of God. For anyone who who pursues honor does not attain God's glory, but glory of kings, of which it is said, but the glory of kings is an investigated matter. Everyone requires about him, who is he and what is he, that he is afforded such honor. And they oppose him, saying that he is not devising of such kavod. However, the person who flees from glory, minimizing his own glory while maximizing the glory of God, attains kavod Elohim. What this is really just saying is that when you're trying to find just glory for yourself, when you're trying to have everyone praise you all the time, and this goes into what we were talking about last week too, when we were talking about some humility, right? That we're not actually attaining any kavod or honor at all. It's through thinking about the greater picture. It's through offering kavod to others that we actually attain honor and kavod for ourselves, which I think relates back to what you're saying. And similarly, I'm just going to run us through a couple of things really quickly right now because of the time. That Pirkei Avot, Bet Zoma says, who is wise, he who learns from every man, as it is said, from all who taught me, I have gained understanding. And Rabbi Shalom Noach Barzovsky speaks about this, saying, who is dignified does not mean who is made dignified by other people, as is the common understanding. What value is there in being dependent upon other people giving you dignity? Rather, who is dignified, one who gives dignity to all people, is teaching that the gaze of one person to another is like glancing in the mirror. If their face is dirty, they will see in the mirror a dirty face. And it reminds me of this like parable that in the Talmud, there's the story, right? There's two people who are robbing a house, and one of them has a dirty face. And the question is, who is it who goes and washes their face? Anyone have an idea? Who is the one who goes and washes their face?
Themselves.
What?
Themselves? You wash their
The
own
person
face.
who washes their face is the one with the clean face. Why? Because he's looking in the face of the person who's dirty, and he says, oh, I must have a dirty face too. The person who has the dirty face is looking at the person with the clean face and thinking, oh, my face is clean, I'm totally fine. And so the projection that we have of ourselves is projected on others, right? Like there's this idea that it kind of pushes the limits of how it is that we see the world. All right, I'm going to need to skip some things, but there is one thing that I think is really, really important to bring in here, and then I'm going to stop there. So one other thing about kavod, I started teaching it a little bit. It comes from Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe when he's teaching about the midah of kavod. And what he points out is that the word kavod means weighty or heavy. And like I was talking about before, how that means you have weight, you matter, right? The opposite of kavod is Challah, is kal, which means light, a very, very lightweight. When we say that someone, or when we don't give someone kavod, honor, what we're doing is we're treating someone lightly. You don't matter, your concerns don't matter, you don't have any weight, I'm not really thinking about you. And the word kavod is associated with honor and respect. The word kal is associated with klala, which means curse. When we look at another person and we treat them lightly, when we don't give them their due kavod, what we're doing essentially is cursing them. And when the Torah is teaching us to choose blessing rather than curse, what is it potentially pushing us to do? But to treat everyone and to hold everyone, giving them the kavod, the weight that they deserve, because when we don't, when we treat people lightly, we're bringing curses into our world.
May I just read two sentences from an article I read in Reform Judaism? A rabbi or someone, his name is Copeland, writes, to be a slave is to have your humanity and dignity called into question at every turn. To be free is to lift up and affirm the dignity and humanity inherent in yourself and in all people.
Beautiful. Right.
Very lovely couple of sentences there.
Absolutely. And completely on target with what it is that we're talking about here, right? Kavod is about lifting ourselves and everyone else up. We don't lift each other. We don't bring honor to ourselves by pulling someone down. We
Right.
can only bring honor to ourselves through bringing honor to others and bringing honor to our tradition and so on.
Kind of takes us back to where we were at the beginning. It completes a circle. It's encouraging us to look for the good in everyone.
Yeah. Which is why if you look at the very end of the commentary for today, it always connects it to different midot, to different soul traits. And one of the ones that it associates it with is Zman l'chaf zechut, which means giving people the benefit of the doubt, and how important that is. Because sometimes we can hear someone say something and immediately we jump to the wrong conclusion. We're like, why would this person say this? This is awful, and so on. Whereas if we gave that person the benefit of the doubt and we ask questions, then perhaps we find that there's more merit and kavod that is, should be there. And along the line, I put a lot of text here, didn't I? I got excited doing this one. I just want to go to this very last quote because it reminds me of exactly what you just read, Michael. And that book that you read, the Copeland's book, is a really beautiful one that you took that quote from. But Nancy Wechsler said, kavod means to honor someone by lifting them up. Sometimes the weight is heavy. Still, the process has the potential to purify ourselves and others, raising us all. And if we could take that away from this Torah portion, how much more blessed are all of us?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rabbi
anyone-
Cassi,
Yeah.
I wish we had at least 2 hours with you. I so enjoy listening to you and I get so much out of it, really. Tremendous amount. So thank you.
Thank you. And it's such a blessing to be with all of you. There's so much wisdom and thoughtfulness within this group. I look forward to when we can be in person as well. That day, I hope, will come in the not too distant future, but I'm just so grateful to be able to study Torah with all of you. And next week, we get to go to Parshat V'Shalach, which is my favorite portion. Actually, I have a bunch of favorite portions. You probably hear me say that a number of times throughout the year, but it's one of them. So I look forward to diving into that one with all of you as well.
Okay.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
See you next week at 1.
Early Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you and kol hakavod for this class.
Yes.
Yasher koach.
Thanks.
Oh, for Rabbi Cassie's wisdom, her wisdom. For such a young person, you have tremendous wisdom.
Oh, thank you, Sari. I